Welcome! In this video, I'll introduce Chroma, the rational keyboard that should have been built 400 years ago, or at least today, by Casio, Kawai, or Yamaha. It's extremely easy to play, learn and teach. It's ideal for composing, analyzing how music really works, and exploring new musical styles and worlds. Then, I'll show you the rational music notation that matches this keyboard, a system that makes reading and writing music incredibly simple. Forget months or years spent struggling with sharps, flats, key signatures, and confusing symbols that hide the true structure of music. Finally, we'll see how these new tools let us rewrite the rules of classical harmony, which are mostly relics of medieval habits, and instead build a rational system based on physical and perceptual principles. We can begin to really explain why certain chord progressions feel beautiful. This is a risky project. Many people have attempted similar things over the past 400 years, none succeeded. Proposing yet another solution invites hostility and ridicule, just as it did for every predecessor, as this good historical video clearly shows. But I want to do it anyway. It's ironic that even Guido d'Arezzo, the recognized father of the modern notation, was expelled from his monastery for his heresy. The dissatisfaction with standard music theory is real. It's complicated, illogical, burdened by terrible notation and a flawed keyboard, all inherited from traditional historical choices. So, let's try again. Many years ago, in astronomy, choosing the Earth as the reference point led to 1,500 years of the Ptolemaic system, with epicycles and strange concepts like deferents and equants that had no real connection to physical reality. But when the reference changed to the Sun, the elegant and simple Copernican system emerged. It replaced the old one with clearer orbits and brought enormous intellectual and practical advantages. In the same way, a long time ago, music chose a single diatonic scale from among over 2,000 possible scales, due to historical and cultural factors rooted in Greek and medieval traditions. That choice led to an unreasonably complicated notation, an asymmetric keyboard layout, and a distortion of harmonic theory and analysis. But what if we change the reference again, this time to the fundamental 12-tone symmetry of the octave, where no scale is special? The result is a symmetric, agnostic keyboard, far easier to build and, more importantly, at least 12 times easier to play, learn and teach. It also leads to a new, clear notation and a completely revised theoretical foundation for music analysis and perception. Of course, this historical wrong start still gave us a wonderful legacy of music, and that's the main argument used by professional musicians against reform. It worked well, why change it? Just study it and move on. My reply is simple: all that beauty was created despite the wrong keyboard, the wrong notation, and the wrong theory. Just like the amazing work of Ptolemaic astronomers, who calculated eclipses precisely, using a model that was completely wrong. I'm not trying to convince people who love the current system. From my experience, seasoned musicians rarely feel the need for a change. They've already mastered the complexity after years of effort. This video is for everyone else. People who struggle with standard music education and feel frustrated by it. And there are many. Just look at the growing number of videos and articles criticizing traditional notation and asking for alternatives. I'm not a professional musician, but I've played piano and other instruments as a hobby since I was a kid. My real work is in complex systems. I've designed computers, chips, scientific hardware, software, electronic musical instruments, always seeking the most efficient way to manage complexity. When I applied that mindset to music, I felt an urge to change everything, simplify everything, both the hardware and the software. After many years of trial and error, I believe I've found a complete and satisfying solution. I can already hear the immediate objection from professional musicians: "You're an engineer, not a musician, don't you dare criticize our music." My quick reply is: you're great musicians, but you know little about physics, complex systems, and user interface design. Along the way, I discovered that dozens of others had already tried this path, starting 400 years ago with Spanish priest Lobkowitz. Some even gained a bit of fame. But for many reasons, a Copernican revolution in music never happened. Some were too obscure, some made things worse, some lacked a complete theory, and all had to fight against the weight of tradition. You'll find links in the description if you want to explore that history. It's clearly a David versus Goliath situation, once again a lone reformer going up against a billion classical keyboards and centuries of intellectual production, armed only with a strange keyboard and a few pages of notation and theory. Sounds familiar? Just like 1600 in astronomy. But this time, the solution is more complete. The world has changed. More people are frustrated. The internet can help ideas spread. I hope at least a small group of people will find value in this project. And to make that happen, I'll need a bit of collaboration. See the finale at the end of the video for details. All explanations about sound, perception, melody, and the emotional effects of chords must begin from first principles, or at least from real experiments, ancient or modern, not from the authority of tradition or old textbooks. Point 1. Pythagoras was among the first to explore the psychoacoustic properties of intervals. He essentially conducted early psychophysiological experiments and discovered the connection between frequency ratios and auditory perception. In the last 200 years, through spectral analysis, we've learned that any sound consists of a fundamental frequency plus a sequence of overtones, the harmonics, which are integer multiples of the fundamental. These overtones shape the unique timbre of each sound. Our inner ear, the cochlea, and the brain perform a kind of mechanical and electrical spectrum analysis, mapping each sound to specific positions inside the cochlea. In a way, we see sound as dynamic spatial structures dancing along that little spiral. The auditory system has evolved to fuse these overtones into a single perceived tone. This explains why humans have a natural preference for certain intervals, like the octave, the fifth, and the fourth, all directly derived from the harmonic series and experienced as particularly consonant, confirming the work of Pythagoras, and explaining the natural tendency of two voices singing at those intervals. Point 2. Repeating these consonant intervals, like the fifth or fourth, and folding them into a single octave leads to a sequence of 12 distinct tones, almost equally spaced, a principle discovered independently in many cultures throughout history. This small irregularity, the Pythagorean comma, caused major tuning issues for centuries. A solution came in 1580 from Chinese scholar Zhu Ziyu, who proposed the equal temperament, a system in which each of the 12 intervals in an octave has the same frequency ratio, about 1.06, or the 12th root of 2. A result grounded in both physics and physiology. This interval is sadly called a halftone, here I will call it a step. Point 3. Ethnomusicology also gives us insights. Many cultures naturally favor speech intonation patterns and scales jumping by 1.06 steps, creating hexatonal scales, or jumping by 7 steps, which is the perfect fifth interval. A very important point, never addressed in classic music theory. These jumps define two interleaved hexatonal scales within the octave. If you keep jumping by 2 steps, you stay within one of them. If you jump by 7, or any odd number, you switch to the other one. Point 4. So from these three foundations, physics, physiology, and ethnomusicology, we derive a 12-tone octave, composed of 2 interleaved 6-tone scales. One chromatic scale with 2 hexatonal subscales. It's beautiful, linear, symmetrical, and deeply rooted in nature and culture. Keyboard, notation, theory, must follow, not be imposed by tradition. Nowhere in this logic appears the oddly spaced 7-tone diatonic scale, which is just a historical byproduct of the Greek and Middle Eastern musical dialects. Scales like Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian and other modes are just selections of 3 tones from one hexatonal scale and 4 from the second one. Other musical cultures, Chinese, Indian, Arabic, African, jazz, bebop, have made different selections, but almost always from the same chromatic 12-tone pool, through the hexatonal framework. There are over 2,000 possible scale combinations from these 12 tones. Western culture uses only a few dozen. The rest of the world combined maybe uses 100. That leaves a vast unexplored musical landscape. Point 5. Now that we understand how complex sounds are encoded in the ear, and we have keyboard instruments that can produce those sounds, the next step is to create a notation system that clearly describes both the sounds and their keyboard mapping. And with all that, we can finally build a theory of how these structures affect us emotionally. The key idea of this project is that these four components, sound, keyboard, notation, theory, should follow a simple, linear, one-to-one mapping. No arbitrary distortions. No particular dialect influence. No unnecessary complexity. You may remember the acronym WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. It was a guiding principle in the 1970s, first used at Xerox and later by Apple, to make complex software and hardware intuitive and easy to use. That principle gave us the personal computer revolution. Music needs its WYSIWYG moment. The keyboards of the whole world come from the influence of the European musical culture, which is based on a local musical dialect born 2,000 years ago, and a set of rules slowly developed in the last 400 years, with the accumulation of all sort of formal and structural errors. Let's see how the keyboard should be designed, following the fundamentals described in the previous chapter. There are some conflicting requirements. There have been hundreds of new keyboard inventions in the last 400 years. Many solutions were even mechanically identical to this one. Every name has been used: isomorphic, linear, 66, balanced. The idea has always been the same: to correct a wrong design. But not a single one was able to supersede the classic keyboard, and there are many reasons for that. Now, I think the Chroma keyboard finally satisfies all requirements. A uniform sequence of interleaved dark and white keys, this satisfies points 1, 2, and 3. The only asymmetry is in the color of the dark keys, 2 black and 4 gray. The 2 black keys are the same as in a standard piano keyboard. They define the C, D, E white keys, satisfying points 4 and 7. The 4 gray keys maintain the uniformity of the dark key sequence but hint at the missing 4 diatonic notes, F, G, A, B, satisfying points 5 and 6. Point 8 is self-evident, just look at Chroma. I think it's beautiful and elegant, like the good old piano. On top of that, it is very easy to produce same mechanics as every keyboard in the world, just a simple rearrangement and recoloring of the keys. Even more economical. How do you play it? How good is it? Well, this part is the easiest to explain. It's wonderful. It's exactly what I dreamed of when I was a boy struggling with the piano, hating the absurd difficulties I encountered. Learning Frère Jacques was so easy, and yet I couldn't play it starting from any other white key. Never mind the black keys. What was wrong? The piano teacher said I had to be patient and learn all the scales, alterations, key signatures. In a few months you'll get it. Now a short story. A week ago, a friend of mine saw my Chroma keyboard. He had never touched a piano before. I offered to teach him Frère Jacques. Not too difficult, just press 3 white keys, then the next 3 dark ones. Easy enough. Then, without me saying anything, he tried to play it again, starting from a wrong white key, and he played Frère Jacques transposed, unknowingly. Then I said, why don't you try starting from a black key? Just invert black and white. And he did it. Frère Jacques played in all 12 tonalities by a complete beginner, in 15 minutes, no lessons, no scales, no pain. As for me playing Chroma, I can say it was an amazing experience. I thought it would be hard to unlearn decades of piano playing and relearn different fingerings. The first days were frustrating, my hands didn't know where to go. After a week, something started to click. I began to see patterns I had never seen on the old piano. Chords were so easy. Transposing was simply a matter of moving the hand, with no change in fingering. Chord progressions became a visual sequence of shape alterations, not abstract rules like 4, 5, 1 cadences. Now, after only 2 months of practice, I am just as fluent on Chroma as on my old piano. But now I see the music in a completely different way. I see symmetries, patterns, structures in music that before were hidden behind a sequence of meaningless key signatures, flats, and sharps. Funny thing, it's easy to play with your eyes closed. What matters are the shapes, not the absolute positions. And playing many songs by heart, I immediately see the diatonic pattern, 3, 4, 3 keys of one color and 4 of the other. You instantly know the key, even if it's E flat. About the importance of spatial shapes, when you improvise you can simply try some symmetric positions of your hand, striking the keyboard almost randomly, and the result will surprise you. Another example. A phrase from Rhapsody in Blue, see how easy it is to play it in another key. I couldn't transpose it so easily on my old piano keyboard. I wish I had this keyboard when I was a boy learning Frère Jacques. The tones, the intervals between them, the position of the symbols on the score, and the keyboard keys must all have a one-to-one linear correspondence, without unnecessary complications. A single tone should correspond to a single key and to a single symbol on the score, and vice versa. Similar intervals must have the same spatial extension on both the keyboard and the score. That's the WYSIWYG principle in full. But this is not the case with the traditional piano keyboard, or with the standard 5-line staff. The white keys look evenly spaced, but the tonal distance between them is inconsistent. The black keys are even worse, being spaced unevenly. From an engineering point of view, the 5-line staff is a true nightmare. It uses 5 lines to encode 7 irregularly spaced tones. The same note may be placed either in a space or on a line, depending on the octave. The tonal distance between 2 notes is completely inconsistent, and learners must memorize the distortion by rote. The black keynotes don't even have a proper position, they are alterations of the white notes using accidentals, which change depending on the mystical key signature. The result? You can end up with 4 different notations for the same tone, or one identical symbol representing 3 different tones. Oh, and I almost forgot, everything changes depending on which of the 7 clefs you're using. My mind goes numb when professional musicians say, "I don't see the problem, I feel comfortable with the notation." But this competence, achieved after years of hard work, is not a justification for a fundamentally flawed system. Someone should take responsibility for this madness, for the billions of hours wasted learning such unnecessary complexity. But now we finally have a clean, rational keyboard, so let's fix the notation too. Just look at the keyboard, it has 6 dark keys, 2 black and 4 gray. A simple pattern that provides reference points to visually locate each note. Imagine 6 vertical lines corresponding to these dark keys, matching the colors. The spaces in between correspond to the white keys, that is, 1 hexatonic scale. The lines correspond to the dark keys, the 2nd hexatonic scale. In this vertical configuration, it becomes extremely easy to describe scales, chords, fingerings. White circles in the spaces, black circles on the lines, the black circles slightly higher than the white ones, same mapping as the keyboard, it's visual, intuitive, WYSIWYG. You immediately know where to put your fingers. No lessons required. Now, rotate these 6 lines 90 degrees counterclockwise, and you get the hexagram, where each key and note has its own precise, unambiguous representation for any music score. No sharps or flats, no key signatures, no clefs. Cornelis Pot made the same proposal 100 years ago for the standard diatonic keyboard, with the 2+3 black keys pattern. It was too confusing, and didn't address the diatonic issue. Someone might criticize that we're now using 6 rows to represent 13 notes, while the traditional staff uses 5 lines to represent 18 notes, with all its hidden complexity. I firmly believe it's worth a little extra space to gain complete clarity and consistency. Moreover, the traditional staff usually consists of 2 staves, treble and bass, separated by a large white space filled with illegible ledger lines. In that same vertical space, the new notation can fit 3 adjacent hexagrams. Both notations encode 37 notes, but only the new one gives each note a precise, unique position, with no accidentals and no ambiguity. With this short description, I've already explained everything you need to know about the new notation. No further lessons are needed, even a child could begin reading and interpreting it. Compare that to how many lessons it takes to teach all the rules of the standard staff. One last powerful advantage of the new notation: linearity and absence extra symbols. It allows for instant transposition. You can shift an entire phrase or piece up or down by any number of tones simply by moving the group of notes along the hexagram. Printed sheet music could be designed with transparent overlays, the notes printed on one layer, the hexagram on another, repositionable. On a computer, of course, this would be child's play. In the new notation, instead of the now useless clef and key signature, you might simply mark at the beginning of the hexagram the tones used in the piece, the scale or mode, to guide the reader. As for the timing and duration of notes, I take an agnostic approach. You can still use standard rhythmic notation on the hexagram, which works as usual. But you can also explore modern approaches, like variable length bars, piano roll style, which are now common in YouTube tutorials. I am experimenting with pre-ruled hexagrams, with light vertical time markings, to quickly write down a composition with dots or bars, as you see fit. For learners, you can use the piano roll style, and rotate the score vertically to match the keyboard layout exactly. For the graphical part, we are done. Now we must take care of some basic terminology and the literal description of notes, melodies, and chords. It's a painful step which most people will criticize, but it is fundamental for a complete revolution. A tone, or note, is a sound with a specific pitch. The interval between 2 tones is called a step, not a half tone. Saying there are 12 half tones in an octave is like saying there are 12 half stairs in a staircase. Why not just call them steps? In our system, an octave is made of 12 tones separated by 12 equal steps, each about 1.06 in frequency ratio, the chromatic scale. These 12 tones are divided into 2 interleaved sets of 6, the hexatonal scales, with a double step. Now, what name should we give to these tones? The current naming system is a mess. We've arbitrarily chosen 7 white keys to be named A, B, C, or Do, Re, Mi, depending on the country, and Do doesn't correspond to A. The intervals between the seemingly equal white keys can be 1 or 2 steps. The 5 black keys are treated as second-class accidents, with confusing double names. None of this reflects the real position of tones in the octave. And so people grow up believing there are only 7 notes, like in the Sound of Music movie, Do Re Mi, song, and never really understand the complete chromatic structure. Did I already say that this is a mess? Let's fix that. Since music is fundamentally numerical, as Pythagoras said, why not simply number the notes, 1 to 12? This is the best name for each of them. Now you know that going from note 2 to note 8 is 6 steps up, no more guessing. In the traditional system, going from D flat to G requires knowing intervals by rote, semitone, whole tone, and so on, then compute the result in semitones. There are 6 of them, obviously. Even terms like fourth, fifth, third, octave are misleading. What we really mean is listed in this table. So, maybe we should just call the octave a 12. But let's not push too hard. The final step, now we need a way to describe melodies and chords. A sequence of notes can be described by their numbers, enclosed in square brackets, to remind a musical measure. A chord can be written as the note's numbers enclosed in parentheses. But the best way to describe a chord is by simply writing the number of steps between the notes, starting from the lowest one. 4-3 is the major triad. 3-4, the minor one. 4-3-4 is a major 7 chord. 3-4-3 is a minor 7 chord. Clear and immediately descriptive. This ultra-compact symbolism described the chord type. You can play it anywhere on the keyboard, the fingerings will be always the same. It will be quite easy to memorize the more common chords. After a while, the steps number 3 or 4 will immediately suggest a minor or major harmonic quality. If you need to specify the exact tonality of the chord, you can add the root note as a number in parenthesis before the chord, or even after the chord if it is more convenient to specify the top note. A lot of rewiring is needed to fix centuries of bad terminology, but it's worth it. The reward is clarity, simplicity, and easy access for everyone, an inclusive revolution. The analysis of a chord, harmony, or melody cannot be done in isolation. The same chord changes its quality depending on the bass note and on the specific harmonic content of the instruments playing it. In the rational music chapter, we saw that every sound contains a structure of overtones, a sequence of frequencies that are integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. These overtones can be visualized as the teeth of a comb, regularly spaced. The lower the fundamental frequency, the denser the teeth. At higher fundamental frequencies, they are more widely spaced. The lowest bass note, with its dense overtone spacing, becomes the reference used by the brain to process all the higher tones, with their sparser overtones. The bass note acts like a standard ruler, defining the allowed positions for the overtones of higher-pitched notes. The brain computes the beating interference between overlapping overtones as sweet or harsh, and it does so across all the overtones of all the notes being played. That's a lot of processing, and the result is an emotional reaction to every chord we hear. There is no absolute value in the abstract set of notes in a chord. Every chord sounds different depending on its inversion, and any given chord can be formally interpreted in different ways. And the same chord will sound different when played on an instrument with a different timbre, due to its unique overtone structure. For these reasons, I believe that traditional music theory is not the right tool to analyze the complex effect of sound on our equally complex auditory system. Trying to explain everything using rules derived from the diatonic scale, a local cultural dialect, is like using the Ptolemaic system to explain the solar system. It may work partially, it may describe something real, but it does so in a distorted and misleading way. The modern music scholar should be more like an entomologist than an authoritarian ruler. The entomologist doesn't prescribe how insect wings must be made, he simply observes, records, and catalogs their many variations, and goes out on expeditions to find new and strange ones. We should do the same in music. Observe, record, and classify every possible combination of notes, their shapes and evolutions, their overtone quality and register, and statistically measure the emotional effects they produce. That's what music theory should be. Music theory must be descriptive, not prescriptive. In fact, music needs only one prescriptive rule. You are free to create and play anything you like. Invent your own rules. Then wait and see if anyone likes it. With the Chroma keyboard and the new linear notation, this kind of work becomes possible, finally free from the biased superstructure of the diatonic keyboard and the 5-line staff. Instead of analyzing a beautiful cadence as the result of a 4-5-1 progression. And forgetting to mention that the inversion matters, otherwise it won't sound beautiful, we could start from scratch. We could discover the beautiful shapes that emerge on Chroma, and explore how they transform into one another, and how they are interconnected. If you just look at its shape, you can immediately reason about its effect. The beauty of this approach is that, with practice and very little theory, you can memorize a few dozen shapes, and learn what kind of sound and emotion each one produces. You gradually build a palette of form, sound, color, with which to paint your next composition. Using the chord interval numeric notation, you can see that symmetric numbers, 323, 343, 424, 434, etc. are directly related to symmetric finger positions on the keyboard, and all these chords have a beautiful sound. It's WYSIWYG all the way through. And remember that everything you learn, any form, pattern or sequence can be instantly transposed to every key. Same shape, same pattern, same fingering. I'm well aware that this video will attract the angry criticism of 97% of professional musicians, teachers, and scholars who feel comfortable with the traditional system. As I said at the beginning, I don't want to change their world. If they're happy with it, that's perfectly fine. This is a proposal for the remaining 3%, those who are not satisfied and are looking for a better way. Unfortunately, we're stuck in a catch-22. There's only one rational keyboard, mine, and I'm not going to build another one myself. No keyboards to play with, then no users can test the new ideas. No active users, then nobody will build and sell them. So, here comes the call to action. Work to be done. Some brave young soul out there could launch a startup to build a few thousand Chroma keyboards for the rest of us. Who knows, you might even get rich doing it. If you believe this project makes sense, ask for a Chroma keyboard at your favorite music store, or write directly to Casio, Yamaha, Koei, or Steinway. It costs nothing, and if enough people around the world make the same request, maybe one of the big players will finally decide to test the market. For them, producing a few thousand units would be a negligible investment. Run psychoacoustic experiments on how people perceive consonance and dissonance with different timbres and instrument types. Develop software to compute consonance and dissonance of chords based on real overtone structures. Build notation tools. Convert MIDI to the new notation. Transpose music easily. Generate and print music using the hexagram staff. Write software to translate traditional sheet music into the new notation. We also need music theorists to explore these new concepts. To write manuals about consonance, symmetry, structure, and musical form. To rethink the enormous body of material inherited from the classical system. And finally, share this video with others. Thank you for your interest.